In September 1937, Mitsubishi faced challenges in developing a modern twin-engine bomber for the Imperial Navy. The Mitsubishi G4M, codenamed Betty by the Allies, was a powerful medium-class bomber with excellent range in combat action throughout the World War II. Despite being built in limited numbers, just over 2,400 were built, the G4M Betty was a medium bomber of a considerable value to the Empire of Japan, allowing it to retain its holding across the Pacific. Its design featured high-powered engines, a clean low-drag airframe and minimal weight. The wings were designed to include fuel tanks, but to hold down weight, armor or self-healing features were omitted. During World War II, the Mitsubishi G4M was a prominent Japanese aircraft acknowledged for its quicker and longer range. The Betty bomber, the most renowned Japanese aircraft of the war, was regularly utilized for bombing kamikaze missions. It sunk 2 massive ships in the Pacific, including the capital ship. However, as the war progressed, its significance deteriorated, reflecting Japan's desperation. The plane also acted as a mothership for the Yokosuka MXY-7 Ohka, which launched a kamikaze rocket to defend Japan from the American advanced fire. The Mitsubishi G3M, built and deployed in 1937, was assigned to the Imperial Japanese Navy as a twin-engine, land-based medium bomber for the World War II. Mitsubishi was charged with creating an unparalleled bomber with extreme range and speed. The new bomber had to reach a height of 9,800 feet, around 3,000 meters, and travel a long distance of 2,300 miles, 3,700 kilometers, while carrying an 1,800-pound payload. To accomplish these lofty goals, the Mitsubishi developed the G4M Betty bomber, the finest land-based naval bomber at the time. Mitsubishi avoided self-sealing tanks in order to fulfill the needs of the Imperial Japanese Navy. To protect the crew and reduce weight, the designers of the G4M bomber opted not to utilize armor or shielding. As a result, the aircraft and its operators were very exposed to cannons and machine guns. Allied fighters pilot dubbed the jet the Flying Zippo, or the one-shot lighter, implying that merely firing the fuel tanks would cause the plane to explode in flames. Because of its long, streamlined design, Japanese pilots refer to the G4M as hamoki, which translates as cigar. The G4M was equipped with a 7.7mm gun on the nose side of the fuselage and on top, as well as a 20mm cannon on the tail. Because of its high altitude, the G4M was quite effective against stationary targets. The tail gun was more lethal than the other aircraft's weaponry, posing a serious danger. The G4M's ability to remain flying despite being heavily damaged was a startling characteristic, with pilots often not even realizing that they had been hit by the enemy fire. In September 1939, the first prototype of the Betty bomber was dismantled from the Mitsubishi Nagoya design, and the pieces were loaded onto 5 carts. By the end of October, the plane had been rebuilt and was ready to fly. Mitsubishi's principal test pilot, Katsuzo Shima, flew the plane for the first time on October 23rd. Despite the successful flight and test, the Imperial Japanese Navy originally rejected the ambitious aircraft. Instead, a more promising G6M1, designed for heavy escort aircraft, was examined. When the G6M1 fell short of expectations, Mitsubishi was tasked with producing the G4M Betty. This legendary Japanese plane saw action in nearly every Pacific combat and served in a variety of roles, becoming a symbol of Japanese strength long after the war. The G4M Betty launched an attack on 2 British warships, the HMS Prince of Wales and the HMS Repulse. HMS Prince of Wales was a cutting-edge battleship with radar-guided shooting and 10 14-inch cannons and 80 UP projectors. It demonstrated British might and was dispatched to the Battle of the Denmark Strait to oppose the German Bismarck ship. HMS Repulse, an older battle cruiser, served in the First World War for a long period and was rebuilt and modernized multiple times. Despite its age, it was well armed when it left Singapore to face the Japanese. The Japanese attack on the Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941 had a profound influence on World War II. Singapore's harbour was clogged with planes, signalling the start of the Pacific War. Admiral Sir Thomas Spencer von Phillips' Force Z set out with 4 destroyers including the HMS Prince of Wales and the HMS Repulse. They were part of the Admiral Sir Thomas Spencer von Phillips' Force Z, which felt that assaulting from the rear would allow them to sever the Japanese supply line. Despite repeated errors, Phillips elected to continue, assuming that the high-angle control systems and the Prince of Wales were impervious to the aircraft damage. He was uninformed about the capabilities of the Japanese planes and torpedoes. Phillips, like many Royal Navy commanders, felt that aircraft posed only a small threat and declined the Royal Air Force's offer of protection. The Imperial Japanese deployed a fleet of battleships, cruisers and destroyers to react to the British squadron 1 hour after leaving port. The two troops were 9 kilometers apart, but the precipitation obscured their vision. The radar of the Prince of Wales failed to detect the Japanese aircraft, so one of the Japanese pilots dropped a flare over their cruiser Shokai. Phillips directed that his team return to Singapore. The British destroyer HMS Thanatos reported being assaulted by the Japanese bomber planes on December 10. Force Z was discovered by the Japanese scout plane minutes later. The Japanese abandoned their attack on the HMS Thanatos and moved north to attack the larger fish. 8 G4Ms were destroyed in HMS Repulse, although only one strike caused major damage. More Japanese planes dropped into the height of torpedoes 20 minutes later. The British used Force Z to escape 9 of these planes, while the British force shot at the aircraft, damaged in 3 planes and brought down 1. Just below the surface, 8 torpedoes were launched towards the HMS Prince of Wales. The skipper attempted to escape by maneuvering the ship, but one of the torpedoes struck its target, producing a massive explosion in the port engine room. The ship flooded as a result of watertight gasket failure, forcing the ship to tilt by more than 11 degrees. The starboard cannons were rendered ineffective against low-flying torpedo bombers, and all but 2 anti-aircraft guns were rendered ineffective. The Japanese retaliated with 26 G4M Betty bombers and a swarm of torpedoes aimed at the underbelly of HMS Prince of Wales. After 3 of the torpedoes hit the target, the ship was barely afloat. Despite dodging 19 torpedoes, the HMS Repulse was struck 4 times. The crew abandoned the HMS Repulse and the HMS Prince of Wales, both of which capsized in minutes. The ship was also sinking, and one of the destroyers arrived to rescue the survivors. As the destroyer rolled over, the bilge keel collided with it and almost sunk it. Both British ships were eventually engulfed by the sea, owing to the G4M Betty bombers. As the surviving members of the unit attempted to rescue as many of their men as possible, the Japanese returned to base. Mitsubishi had constructed 2,416 G4M Betty bombers by the conclusion of its production life. As bombers, special attack aircraft, kamikaze planes and transporters, they were present in practically every fight and moment of the Second World War. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was largely responsible for the Pearl Harbor attack, was being transferred in one which was shot down in 1943, and the G4M had a role in the war's conclusion. The Japanese delegation that surrendered to the United States was also on board a G4M Betty bomber in August 1945. Thanks for watching. I have more similar videos on my channel that you may like. See you guys in the next video.